Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going on a deep dive into something a little different. We're going to be taking a look at this personal journal podcast called Life of Mikhaiel. It's really about patience and prayer, and I think this guy's story is going to resonate with a lot of our listeners.
Yeah, I agree. Personal journals are really interesting because they offer such a raw and unfiltered perspective. You know what I mean? There's something about that realness that makes his insights into patience and prayer even more impactful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's really honest about his struggles, especially during this time when he was trying to get this big career break.
Mm.
He even talks about how he'd spend like an hour every morning visualizing himself in his ideal role.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. A lot of people forget that patience isn't just about sitting around and waiting. It's also about preparing yourself for the thing you're waiting for.
Exactly. It's like active waiting.
Yeah.
And then after his visualization, he'd always pray. But what's really cool is that he wasn't praying for the job itself.
Huh. So what was he praying for?
That's the thing. He was praying for the qualities he needed to develop to be ready for that job.
Uh,
So instead of asking for an external change, he was focusing on internal transformation.
wow. That's a really subtle but powerful shift.
Right. And that's where I think the true power of patience starts to come in. But here's the catch. For months, he heard absolutely nothing back.
Oh man, that's tough. It's that radio silence that gets you.
It's easy to get discouraged when things don't happen right away.
Totally.
And he admits he felt that way too. At first, he even says he felt kind of forgotten. But then something interesting happens. He starts to see the silence not as a void, but as an opportunity.
Hmm. So like a chance to grow, do you think that was a natural progression or did he consciously decide to change his perspective?
It's hard to say from the podcast. He doesn't explicitly say, but he does mention this moment during a nature walk when this feeling of calm just washed over him. He realized that his anxiety wasn't about the job itself, but the fear of failing.
Ah, I see. So the silence gave him the space to really confront that fear.
Right. It became less about waiting for the job and more about facing this deeper internal challenge.
That's deep.
Yeah. And that's when his prayer shifted too. He stopped pleading for the job and started asking for the courage to face his fear of failure.
So it wasn't just about getting what he wanted, but about changing how he approached the whole situation.
Exactly. It really challenges the whole prayer is just asking for stuff
Yeah.
idea.
It's more about self-reflection and personal growth.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's amazing is that Mikhail actually ends up getting the job. But it comes when he least expects it.
That always seems to happen. It's like when you finally let go of the outcome, that's when things fall into place.
It makes you think, right? Like how many times do we miss out on something because we give up too soon? Or because we let our anxiety get in the way?
It happens all the time. Mikhail's story shows us the importance of not just waiting, but waiting well. Using that time to grow and face our fears and trust the process.
And then he goes even deeper. He actually compares patience to a muscle.
Oh, wow.
I
A
mean,
muscle. I've never thought about it that way.
it's an interesting analogy, right? I mean, how do you actually train your patience like it's a muscle?
Well, he doesn't really lay out a step-by-step plan or anything, but he does talk about how every time he resisted the urge to just give up, and every time he chose to look at the situation differently, his patience got a little bit stronger.
So it's like making a conscious choice
Yeah.
to step back and look at the bigger picture.
Exactly. Instead of getting all caught up in our immediate emotions and frustrations, we can choose to pause and ask ourselves, okay, what can I actually learn from this? How can this situation make me more patient?
It's like shifting from reacting to reflecting.
I like that.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the other big theme in Mikhail's story, prayer.
Yeah, his whole approach to prayer is pretty eye-opening. He doesn't see it as just this transactional thing where you ask for something and expect to get it.
It's more about surrendering and connecting with something bigger than yourself, right? Like aligning yourself with a higher purpose or whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. And during those months of waiting, he talks about how he stopped focusing on the job itself and started focusing on the changes happening inside of him.
So it was less about give me this job and more about help me become the kind of person who deserves this job.
Exactly. He realized that sometimes the answers we're looking for aren't about our circumstances changing, but about us changing.
It's powerful stuff. And as his focus shifted, so did his whole experience of prayer.
Oh, yeah. He starts talking about this incredible sense of peace and clarity he felt, like all the mental noise just quieted down.
It's that stillness that people are always searching for, right? Whether it's through meditation or mindfulness or prayer. It's about finding that quiet space amidst all the chaos.
And Mikhail found it through prayer. He says it helped him detach from all the anxiety around the job search and tap into this deeper source of strength and wisdom.
That's so interesting, the connection between prayer and inner strength. You wouldn't think they go together, but he makes a really compelling case.
Right. It's not about being passive or giving up control. It's about finding this wellspring of power that comes from something beyond your own limitations.
I love how he describes it. He says it's like changing the world within you.
It's not about the outside world magically rearranging itself. It's about changing your internal landscape so you can handle whatever comes your way with more resilience and clarity.
Yeah, there's a lot of research that backs that up too. All the studies about the psychological benefits of things like prayer and meditation.
It all points to the same thing. When we connect with something bigger than ourselves, we tap into this incredible source of wisdom and strength.
And it changes everything, doesn't it? It shifts our perspective from fear and scarcity to faith and abundance.
It's a total game changer.
Mhm.
And I think Mikhail's story really highlights how patience and prayer can work together to create real and lasting transformation.
Absolutely. It's not about passively waiting or simply asking for things. It's about actively engaging in these practices that cultivate inner strength and clarity and connection with something beyond ourselves.
It's inspiring, isn't it? Like even when things are tough, there's this potential for growth and change.
It really flips the script on the whole instant gratification thing. Sometimes the best things in life take time.
Yeah, for sure. And Mikhail doesn't sugarcoat it. He talks about how hard it was, the doubts and frustrations and the urge to just throw in the towel. But he emphasizes that it's about not letting those feelings control you.
That's resilience right there. Did he ever talk about any strategies he used to deal with those moments?
He did, actually.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. He talks about visualizing a big pause button, like the ones we have on our podcast players, and he would mentally hit that button whenever he felt himself spiraling.
That's a great visual. I can totally see that working.
Right. It's all about mindfulness, right?
Okay.
Being aware of your thoughts and feelings in the moment.
Yeah, and by pausing, he's creating space to choose a different response. Instead of just reacting, he can step back and decide how he wants to engage with the situation.
And that's how he trained his patience muscle, one pause at a time. It's like each time he chose a different response, he got a little bit stronger.
And that's a skill that goes way beyond just waiting for a job or whatever. It's about approaching all of life's challenges with that same sense of patience and awareness.
Totally. So for our listeners out there who are in their own waiting period, what would you say are the biggest takeaways from Mikhail's story?
That's a good question. Well, first I'd say, don't just sit around and wait. Like Mikhail with his visualizations, find ways to actively prepare yourself for what you're waiting for. Even small steps can make a big difference.
It's about taking action, even when you're waiting.
Exactly. And second, try to change your perspective on the whole waiting thing. Instead of seeing it as this empty space, look at it as an opportunity to grow and learn and connect with something bigger than yourself.
Turn the waiting time into growing time.
I like that. And finally, don't forget about the power of practices like prayer or meditation or anything that helps you connect with that inner stillness and build your patience muscle.
It's about finding those things that nourish your soul.
Absolutely. Mikhail's story shows us that real transformation isn't always about these big, sudden changes. It's often a slow and steady process of showing up, doing the work, and trusting that things will unfold as they should.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
And even if things don't turn out exactly the way you planned, the journey itself can be incredibly valuable. You might discover hidden strengths, develop a deeper understanding of yourself, and cultivate a more resilient and hopeful outlook on life.
That's a great point.
Hmm.
So to wrap things up, I think Mikhail's story of patience and prayer offers some really powerful lessons for all of us, no matter what challenges we're facing.
It's a reminder that even in those tough moments, there's always potential for growth and transformation.
And sometimes the waiting periods are the most transformative times of all.
So embrace the journey, trust the process, and keep seeking those deeper connections within yourself and the world around you.
A huge thank you to Mikhail for sharing his story, and to all of you for joining us on this deep dive into patience and prayer. Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking those big questions.